Your CIO is not in your business right now. They're at a conference, or they're submitting themselves for an award, or they're preparing a presentation for a board meeting that'll be full of technical language you didn't ask for and just will not remember. And while that's happening, somewhere in your organization, a division president is absorbing a problem that they never thought to bring to IT. It simply did not occur to them that technology had anything to do with it. And that's a management problem. And it has cost you. You just haven't seen it yet. There was an article published today in CIO.com. The title of that article is Bad CIOs Are Good for Business. And I'll get to that later on because the framing is completely wrong. But first, what the CIO role is actually supposed to do. The CIO role has one job: understand the business well enough to make the technology serve it. Ask yourself, what is yours doing? Because in 30 years of this work as a CIO myself, working directly with CIOs and being brought in specifically to evaluate whether a CIO is performing, what I've seen most often is a CIO who's focused on technology, but not the technology that actually helps the business. They're not integrated into the business units. They're not walking the floor and listening for problems nobody thought to escalate. They're not looking at the P&L and asking which departments are under margin pressure and whether technology can help. They're just looking for the next big initiative, the next modernization, the next thing they can put on their resume or present at a conference. And most of the time, the business pays for it. And I want to give you one very specific example of what it looks like when a technology executive actually does their job. When I was CTO at an insurance company, I made it a habit of walking around, not auditing, not inspecting, just talking to people, saying hello, asking how things were going. And one afternoon, I walked past the president of one of those divisions, and he was clearly not happy. I said, I asked him what was going on. He told me that the risk modeling software, these models run through hundreds of years of weather data and environmental history to evaluate whether an underwriting opportunity is worth pursuing and what the policy should look like, that some of these models were taking up to a week to run and that they were dying mid-run, and the team had to start over from scratch each time. Now, there was a large policy opportunity in front of them, a real revenue opportunity, and they could not get the quote out because the model kept failing after 3 or 4 or sometimes 5 days. Nobody escalated this. Nobody sent in a ticket to IT because the vendor had told them this is just how the software works. Every customer deals with it. So they stopped looking for a solution. The vendor had closed that door. They accepted the vendor's answer as the final word. So I started looking at the problem. A few months later, I was at a Microsoft conference, and I was walking the vendor floor, and I ran into a hardware rep I knew. We started talking about converged infrastructure, storage and compute on a single backplane, everything communicating at speeds that were new at the time. So I asked him one question: can I run full enterprise applications and databases on this device? He said yes. So I arranged a demo unit. We installed it in the data center, configured it, installed the risk modeling software, and had the team start the model that had been taking 3, 4, 5 days. Came in the next morning, asked them how it was going. They said it was done. Not 3 days, not 4 days, not 5 days. Less than 1. We ran more models. The average reduction in model runtime was over 70%. The business could now quote faster than every competitor running the same process. And a few months later, the president of that division called me, and he told me he had to revise the year's revenue forecast upward because of that one solution. The company was now expecting nearly $10 million in additional business they hadn't planned for. And the total investment was under $750,000. Now, I was very happy about that, but I had absolutely no idea that that was going to happen. My only goal was to help the people do their jobs. That's the CIO role. Walking around, listening, finding the problem nobody was looking to solve because the vendor had already told them there was nothing to solve. Asking the question the vendor had no incentive to answer. The CIO role is not applying for awards or attending conferences, modernization initiatives that solves problems nobody had diagnosed or even asked for. Now, one of the clearest signs that your CIO is not doing their job is because they keep submitting themselves for awards. There are dozens of these programs. You submit your name, you become a nominee. Your CIO posts it on LinkedIn, marketing sends out a press release, and quite frankly, nobody outside your IT department cares. The award is not the problem. The time is. Every hour spent on nominations, conferences, and panels is an hour not spent in the business, not spent walking past the division president who is sitting on a problem they never thought to bring to IT, a problem that once solved generated more than $10 million in revenue that they didn't expect. Now, I fell into this pattern myself early on in my career. I've been a keynote speaker many times. Twice I was a keynote speaker at Microsoft CIO conference in Seattle. But I started to notice that the progress I wanted to see back at the office was not happening. And it was because I wasn't there. I stopped all of that. And the work improved. Your CIO should be spending that time in the business, not performing on it. So now let's go back to the article from CIO.com that was recently published. I'll put the link in the description. And again, the title is Bad CIOs Are Good for Business. And the argument is this. A CIO who is performing poorly, missing transformation milestones, letting cloud costs spiral, accumulating unresolved cyber risk, actually produces something valuable for the company. It exposes hidden organizational weaknesses. It forces boards to ask the right questions. It ends what the author calls transformation theater. It creates a strategic reset. The author concludes that the most dangerous CIO is not the one who's visibly failing. It's the comfortable one delivering incremental progress, while risk accumulates quietly. Now, I'll give the author credit for the diagnosis. That part is very accurate. When a CIO does not perform, all of those things do happen. The board does start asking questions. Finance does demand transparency. Governance becomes a real conversation. But here's what the article also cited. A Gartner survey of over 3,000 CIOs found that less than half of the digital initiatives met or exceeded their business outcome targets. Less than half. That is the baseline the industry is already operating at. And the argument being made is that tolerating a bad CIO inside that baseline is somehow productive. But the prescription is completely wrong. If you have a good CIO, one who understands how the company makes money, walks the floor, connects technology to margin and revenue, all of those things also get exposed. But they get dealt with before they become board-level problems, before they become audit findings, before they surface in a diligence process and reduce your valuation. A bad CIO exposing your structural problems is not a feature. It's a capital event you're absorbing instead of preventing. And the fact that the CIO.com published this article tells you something important about where the standard is right now. The bar has dropped so low that enough that the industry publication is making a case as for why failure is productive. Now, you wouldn't accept this from your CFO. You wouldn't accept this from your COO. There are 3 questions worth asking your CIO directly. First, how much of your time last quarter was spent in the business? Not in meetings, not at conferences, not on panels. In actual conversations with the operating divisions, understanding their problems. Second, which departments are under pressure right now, under margin pressure right now? And what is technology doing or not doing to help them? And third, when you bring a technology recommendation to the company, what is the revenue or margin assumption behind it? Not capability, not efficiency. What does this cost us, and what does it return? If you don't get specific, grounded answers to those 3 questions, you're not operating with a CIO. You're operating with a very expensive head of technology who is more focused on their own career than your business. Approval is not comprehension. The gap between what you approved and what you can actually defend is your CIO's job to close. If they're not closing it, that's not a technology problem. That's a capital accountability problem. And you have every right to expect more.